Choose now, Alpha King, Princess Seraphina's voice cut through the crystal ballroom like a blade, or watch your kingdom burn. But Kael's golden eyes weren't on the 100 royal brides who surrounded him like jeweled vultures. They were on the servant girl standing frozen in the doorway, silver light beginning to pour from her skin as ancient magic awakened in her blood, and every enemy in the room suddenly realized exactly who she was. Chapter 1: The Crown's Choice. The golden ballroom sparkled like a jewel box, filled with 100 princesses dressed in silk and diamonds. Each one hoped to catch the eye of Alpha King Kael Nightfall, the most powerful werewolf ruler in the modern world. Their laughter tinkled like crystal as they danced beneath chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. Princess Seraphina of the Eastern Courts adjusted her emerald tiara, confident her beauty would win the crown. Princess Valentina whispered to her ladies about her father's vast armies. They all believed tonight would change their destiny. But in the servants' quarters below, a girl named Zara Moonwhisper scrubbed floors in her torn gray dress, invisible to the world above. Kael stood on the marble balcony overlooking the grand ballroom, his midnight black hair catching the light as his golden eyes scanned the crowd below. Every princess was stunning, accomplished, wealthy beyond measure. Any one of them would strengthen his kingdom through marriage. His advisors watched him eagerly, waiting for him to choose. But his heart pulled him elsewhere, toward the girl who brought him tea each morning with trembling hands and kind eyes. The girl who asked nothing of him but always gave everything. The girl whose gentle touch on his wounded soul meant more than all the crowns in the world. He gripped the balcony railing until his knuckles turned white, fighting the urge to abandon his duty. Below in the kitchen, Zara's hands shook as she arranged silver tea cups on the finest porcelain. Her supervisor, Mrs. Blackthorne, barked orders while the other servants rushed to serve the royal guests. Zara had worked in the castle for 3 years, ever since her parents died in a car accident that left her with nothing. She was grateful for the job, the small room, the scraps of food. But sometimes, when she glimpsed the Alpha King during her duties, her heart did something dangerous. She told herself it was foolish, a poor orphan maid falling for the most powerful man alive. Yet when their eyes met across a crowded room, the world seemed to stop spinning. Mrs. Blackthorne grabbed Zara's wrist roughly, her nails digging into pale skin. The Alpha King has requested tea in his private study. Don't you dare embarrass us, girl. Keep your eyes down, speak only when spoken to, and get out quickly. Zara nodded, lifting the heavy silver tray with practiced grace. Her heart hammered as she climbed the marble stairs toward the upper floors where she'd never been allowed. The sounds of the ball grew distant as she walked down a candlelit corridor lined with ancient portraits of wolf kings. She paused outside the massive oak door, took a deep breath, and knocked softly. "Enter," came his deep voice, sending shivers down her spine. Zara stepped into the study, her bare feet silent on Persian rugs worth more than she'd ever seen. Alpha King Kael stood with his back to her, staring out the window at the forest beyond. Moonlight painted his broad shoulders silver through the glass. "Set it on the desk," he said quietly, never turning around. But as Zara placed the tray down with trembling hands, she felt his golden eyes on her like physical touch. When she finally looked up, the raw longing in his gaze stole her breath away. In that moment, both of them forgot about crowns, duty, and the 100 princesses dancing below. Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in the Philippines, I want to know. Don't just sit back, tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. 3 months earlier, Zara Moonwhisper had arrived at Shadowmere Castle with nothing but the clothes on her back and a letter of recommendation from the village priest. Her parents' funeral was still fresh in her memory, 2 simple graves in the town cemetery that she couldn't afford to visit. The massive stone walls of the castle rose like cliffs from the earth, making her feel smaller than an ant. Mrs. Blackthorne, the head housekeeper, looked her up and down with cold gray eyes before declaring her adequate for kitchen duty. That first night, alone in her tiny servant's room, Zara cried herself to sleep. She was 18 years old, completely alone in the world, and terrified of what tomorrow would bring. The work was backbreaking from dawn until midnight. Zara's hands cracked from harsh soap and freezing water as she scrubbed dishes, swept floors, and hauled buckets of coal to warm the castle's countless fireplaces. The other servants barely spoke to her. They'd learned long ago that forming friendships in service only led to heartbreak when people left or were dismissed. Zara ate her meals in silence, slept on a thin mattress that springs poked through, and counted herself lucky to have a roof over her head. She told herself this was enough, that survival was victory. But late at night, she dreamed of her mother's gentle voice reading fairy tales about girls who found love and happiness. Everything changed the morning she first saw Alpha King Kael nightfall. She was carrying fresh linens to the upper floors when she turned a corner and nearly collided with the most beautiful man she'd ever seen. He was tall and powerful, with midnight black hair and golden eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," she whispered, dropping into a clumsy curtsy with the laundry basket still in her arms. She expected anger, dismissal, punishment for daring to block his path. Instead, he steadied her gently when she nearly toppled over. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice deep and warm like honey. That simple kindness from the most powerful man alive made her heart skip a beat. After that day, their paths crossed more often than seemed possible by chance. Kael would appear in the kitchen just as Zara finished her morning duties, asking for tea that he could have requested from any servant. He'd linger in hallways where she worked, asking quiet questions about her life, her dreams, her favorite books. Zara learned that beneath his crown and royal bearing, he was kind, lonely, and burdened by responsibilities that would crush most men. She found herself looking forward to these stolen moments, hoarding his smiles like precious coins. When he laughed at her shy jokes, when his golden eyes softened as he looked at her, she felt beautiful for the first time in her life. But castles have eyes and ears in every shadow. The other servants began to whisper about the orphan maid who caught the Alpha King's attention. Some were jealous, others worried about her safety. Mrs. Blackthorn watched Zara with sharp, calculating eyes that promised trouble. The noble ladies who visited court sneered when they saw Kael speaking to the help. Zara knew she was walking a dangerous line between two worlds, too poor for his notice, too visible to stay safe. Each moment with him felt stolen, each smile a tiny rebellion against the natural order. She tried to guard her heart, but it was already too late. She was falling in love with a man who belonged to the world, while she belonged to no one at all. The announcement came like thunder on a clear day. Lord Commander Thorne's voice echoed through every corner of Shadowmere Castle as he proclaimed that Alpha King Kael would choose his queen within the month. 100 princesses from the greatest wolf packs across 6 continents would compete for his hand at the Moonfall Ball. The servants gathered in the great hall, listening with wide eyes as Thorne described the eligible maidens, each one beautiful, powerful, and carrying bloodlines that stretched back centuries. Zara stood frozen in the crowd, feeling the world tilt beneath her feet. She pressed a hand to her chest where her heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. Of course he would marry royalty. Of course their stolen moments meant nothing against the weight of his crown. For days after the announcement, the castle transformed into a whirlwind of preparation. Tapestries were cleaned, marble floors polished until they gleamed like mirrors, and crystal chandeliers sparkled with fresh candles. Zara threw herself into work until her hands bled and her back ached, trying to forget the way Kael's golden eyes had softened when he looked at her. She avoided the upper floors where he might appear, taking longer routes through servant corridors to stay invisible. When other maids whispered about which princess would be prettiest, richest, or most suitable, Zara excused herself to scrub pots in the kitchen where the steam could hide her tears. But Kael noticed her absence like a physical wound. He found reasons to visit the kitchen, the laundry rooms, anywhere she might be working. When he finally cornered her in the castle gardens where she was hanging washing on lines, his golden eyes were fierce with something she couldn't name. You've been avoiding me, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Zara kept her eyes on the wet sheets, afraid to look at him. You have important matters to attend to, Your Majesty. The princesses will be arriving soon. The words tasted bitter in her mouth, but she forced them out anyway. She couldn't be selfish with his heart when his kingdom needed him to marry for power and alliance. Kael stepped closer until she could smell his scent, pine forests and midnight storms that made her wolf heritage sing in recognition, though she didn't understand why. What if I don't want to marry any of them? He whispered, his breath warm against her ear. What if the only woman I want is standing right here, hanging laundry and breaking my heart by refusing to look at me? Zara's hand stilled on the clothesline as tears threatened to spill over. She finally turned to face him, seeing her own pain reflected in his golden gaze. Then you're the cruelest man alive, she whispered back, because you're making me love someone I can never have. The raw honesty in her voice made him reach for her, but she stepped back before he could touch her. That night, alone in her small room, Zara made the hardest decision of her life. She would stay invisible during the ball, serve the princesses who came to claim her heart's desire, and smile while her world crumbled around her. She loved Kael too much to be selfish, too much to become the scandal that destroyed his reign. She pressed her face into her thin pillow and cried until exhaustion claimed her. In his royal chambers far above, Kael stood at his window staring at the forest where his wolf longed to run free. Tomorrow, 100 princesses would arrive expecting him to choose a queen. But his heart had already chosen a poor maid who was too noble to let him destroy his kingdom for love. Chapter 2, The Gathering Storm. The first carriages arrived at dawn, rolling through Shadowmere Castle's gates like a parade of jeweled serpents. Princess Seraphina of the Eastern Court stepped out in a gown of emerald silk that cost more than most castles, her golden hair piled high with diamond combs that caught the morning light. Behind her came Princess Valentina with an entourage of 30 servants, Princess Celeste whose father commanded the largest wolf pack in Europe, and Princess Liana whose beauty was legendary across 7 kingdoms. Each arrival was announced with trumpet fanfare that echoed off the mountain peaks surrounding the castle. Zara watched from the kitchen window as these goddesses glided across the courtyard, feeling like a shadow observing creatures made of starlight. The sheer magnificence of their arrival made her chest tight with an emotion she couldn't name, part longing, part fear, and something else that felt dangerously close to recognition. Mrs. Blackthorne gathered all the servants in the great hall, her gray eyes sharp as winter steel. You will be invisible during these proceedings, she commanded, her voice cutting through the nervous whispers. Speak only when spoken to, keep your eyes down, and remember that you exist only to serve. Any servant who brings shame upon this house will be dismissed without reference. Her gaze lingered on Zara longer than the others, a warning that made Zara's stomach clench with fear. She nodded along with the others, understanding perfectly. She was being watched, suspected, marked as trouble. One mistake and she'd be cast out with nothing, just as she'd arrived 3 months ago. But there was something different in Mrs. Blackthorne's expression today, something that looked almost like panic beneath the harsh authority. The older woman's hands trembled slightly as she dismissed the servants, and Zara caught a glimpse of something that might have been anguish flickering across her weathered features. The princesses settled into their luxurious guest chambers like exotic birds claiming the finest perches. Zara was assigned to serve Princess Seraphina, who treated servants like living furniture. Girl, Seraphina commanded without looking up from her jewels, press my gowns and arrange them by color. And be careful, each dress is worth more than your life. Zara curtsied silently and went to work, her hands gentle on silks and velvets she'd never dreamed of touching. As she worked, she listened to the princess practice conversation with her ladies-in-waiting. The Alpha King prefers intelligent women, Seraphina mused, but not too intelligent. Men want wives who enhance their power, not challenge it. But as Zara carefully arranged the emerald gowns, she noticed Princess Seraphina studying her reflection with calculating eyes. Tell me, servant girl, the princess said suddenly, her voice deceptively casual, what is your family name? You have an interesting look about you, almost familiar. Zara's hand stilled on the silk fabric as fear shot through her veins like ice water. "Moon Whisper, Your Highness," she whispered, keeping her eyes downcast as she'd been trained. Princess Seraphina's reflection in the mirror went very still, her green eyes sharpening with sudden interest. "Moon Whisper," she repeated slowly, as if tasting the name for hidden flavors. "How curious. I knew a woman by that name once, many years ago. She was quite remarkable. Powerful bloodline, if I recall correctly. Whatever happened to her?" The question felt like a trap closing around Zara's throat, and she struggled to keep her voice steady. "My parents died in an accident 3 years ago, Your Highness. I know nothing of bloodlines or power." But even as she spoke, she felt Princess Seraphina's gaze boring into her like a physical weight, and something cold and predatory flickered across the princess's beautiful features. Meanwhile, Kael endured endless meetings with advisors who presented each princess like a business proposal. "Princess Valentina brings alliance with the Northern Pax," Lord Commander Thorne explained, spreading maps across the massive oak table. "Princess Celeste would unite the European territories. Princess Liona's bloodline traces back to the first Wolf Kings." Kael listened with growing frustration, his golden eyes distant as they discussed bloodlines, territories, and political advantages. Not one advisor mentioned love, happiness, or compatibility. He was being asked to choose a strategic alliance, not a wife. When they finally dismissed him, he walked the castle corridors like a caged wolf, drawn inevitably toward the servant quarters where his heart lived. But today, something felt different in the castle's ancient stones, a tension that had nothing to do with royal politics and everything to do with secrets that had been buried too long in shadow. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the castle grounds, Mrs. Blackthorne found herself watching Zara with growing desperation. Every time one of the princesses spoke to the girl, every curious glance cast in her direction sent ice through the older woman's veins. She'd spent 3 years keeping Zara invisible, unremarkable, safely hidden among the castle's army of servants. But now, with 100 royal wolves gathering under one roof, their supernatural senses were bound to detect what she'd worked so hard to conceal. The girl's heritage called to them like blood to sharks, and Mrs. Blackthorne knew their time was running out. She'd made a promise to her dying sister, sealed in blood and moonlight, to keep Zara safe until her 19th birthday, when the ancient prophecies said she'd be strong enough to survive what was coming. But that birthday was still 2 months away, and already the wolves were circling. That evening, as Zara helped prepare an elaborate dinner for the royal guests, she caught glimpses of Kael through the serving doors. He sat at the head of the longest table in the castle, surrounded by the most beautiful women in the world, but his golden eyes seemed empty. Princess after princess tried to charm him with wit, beauty, and accomplishments that would make any normal man weak in the knees. Yet his polite smiles never reached his eyes, his attention drifted during their carefully rehearsed conversations, and his fingers drummed restlessly against his wine glass. When Princess Seraphina leaned close to whisper in his ear, Zara saw him stiffen almost imperceptibly. From across the crowded room, his gaze found hers through the crack in the serving door, and the naked longing in his golden eyes nearly brought her to her knees. But she also noticed how Princess Seraphina's gaze followed his, landing on her with the precision of a predator who had finally located her prey. The breaking point came near midnight, when the formal dinner had ended and most of the castle had retired to their chambers. Zara was finishing her duties in the kitchen, scrubbing the last of the crystal wine glasses with hands that trembled from exhaustion and nerves, when Princess Seraphina appeared in the doorway like a vision from a nightmare. Her emerald gown rustled against stone as she glided into the servants' domain, her green eyes glittering with malicious triumph. "I've been thinking about our conversation earlier," she said, her voice honey-sweet and poisonous. "About your family name and your remarkable resemblance to someone I once knew. I believe it's time we had a proper chat about your bloodline, little servant. There are people who would pay handsomely for information about surviving Moon Whispers." Before Zara could respond, before she could even fully process the threat in those words, Mrs. Blackthorne materialized from the shadows like an avenging spirit. Her gray hair had come loose from its severe bun, her weathered face was pale with terror and rage, and her hands shook as she placed herself between Zara and the princess. "Get away from her," she snarled, her voice carrying undertones that made the kitchen's stone walls seem to tremble. "You have no business with this girl, Your Highness. She's nothing but a servant, beneath your notice." But Princess Serafina only smiled wider, her perfect teeth gleaming like fangs in the candlelight. "Oh, but I think she's much more than that. In fact, I'm quite certain she's exactly what certain parties have been searching for." The confrontation that followed would haunt Zara's dreams for years to come. Princess Serafina's true nature began to leak through her beautiful facade as her eyes flashed with predatory light and her fingernails extended into claws that could rend stone. Mrs. Blackthorne stepped forward to meet the threat, and for the first time in 3 years, Zara saw her not as the harsh taskmaster who'd made her life miserable, but as a woman prepared to die protecting someone she loved. "You want her, you go through me first," Mrs. Blackthorne growled, and power rippled through her voice, ancient power that spoke of bloodlines and magic that predated human civilization. Princess Serafina paused, her predatory advance halting as she reassessed the threat before her. Well, she purred, "it seems the little servant has a guardian after all." How touching. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring until Mrs. Blackthorne made a choice that changed everything. With tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, she turned to Zara and spoke words that shattered 3 years of carefully constructed lies. "Your mother made me promise to keep you hidden until your 19th birthday, when the prophecy said you'd be strong enough to survive what's coming. I've been cruel to you because kindness would have made you visible to our enemies. Every harsh word, every extra chore, it was armor I wrapped around you, child. I am Elena Blackthorne, sister to Lyra Moonwhisper, and I have spent every day of the last 3 years hating myself for the pain I've caused you in the name of keeping you alive." The revelation hit Zara like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her knees buckle. Suddenly, every cruel word, every impossible task, every moment of loneliness and pain recontextualized itself in her mind. The aunt who had seemed to hate her had actually been protecting her, sacrificing her own heart to keep Zara safe from threats she was only beginning to understand. Mrs. Blackthorne, Elena, reached for her with trembling hands, 3 years of suppressed love and anguish blazing in her gray eyes. "I'm so sorry, little moon," she whispered, using the pet name Zara's mother had called her. "I'm so sorry for every tear, every harsh word, every night you cried yourself to sleep thinking you were alone in the world. But they were watching, always watching, and the only way to keep you safe was to make you invisible." Princess Serafina's laughter rang through the kitchen like breaking glass, sharp and dangerous. "How absolutely precious," she sneered, her beautiful face twisted with malice. "A family reunion in the servants' quarters. But I'm afraid your touching moment is about to be cut short. You see, there are those who have been searching for the last Moonwhisperer heir for nearly 2 decades. The bounty on her head would buy me 3 kingdoms, and her power." She trailed off, her green eyes glowing with greed and hunger. "Well, let's just say there are rituals that require very specific bloodlines to complete. Zara Moonwhisper is going to make me the most powerful wolf alive." But Elena Blackthorne had not spent 3 years planning for this moment only to fail when it mattered most. As Princess Serafina lunged forward with supernatural speed, Elena moved to intercept her, and the kitchen exploded into chaos as 2 powerful wolves clashed in a battle that shook the castle's ancient foundations. Zara watched in horror and amazement as her cruel taskmaster revealed herself to be a warrior whose skills had been forged in conflicts older than recorded history. Elena's gray hair whipped around her face as she fought with desperate ferocity, every move designed to protect the girl she'd raised in shadow and secrecy. The battle raged across the kitchen, shattering crockery and sending flames dancing wildly as supernatural forces collided with mortal stone. Princess Serafina was younger, stronger, and drunk on the prospect of claiming her prize, but Elena fought with the fury of someone who had already lost too much and refused to lose more. As they grappled near the great hearth, Elena managed to pin the princess against the stone wall, her voice raw with 3 years of suppressed emotion. You want to know about Moon Whisper power, she gasped, her hands glowing with silver light that made Princess Seraphina's eyes widen with sudden fear. Let me show you why we've been hunted for centuries. The power that erupted from Elena's hands was like captured moonlight given form and purpose. It wrapped around Princess Seraphina like liquid silver, binding her movements and muffling her screams of rage. For a moment, the kitchen was filled with light so pure and beautiful that Zara felt tears streaming down her face just from witnessing it. But the effort cost Elena everything she had left. She collapsed to her knees, aged years in seconds, her gray hair turning white as the power drained from her like life from a dying star. The binding will hold her until dawn, she whispered, reaching for Zara with hands that shook like autumn leaves. But others will come. They always come. Zara dropped to her knees beside the woman who had been both her tormentor and her salvation, gathering Elena's frail form into her arms as understanding finally dawned. Every harsh word had been a shield, every cruel task a lesson in survival, every moment of seeming hatred actually desperate love forced into hiding. Aunt Elena, she whispered, the name feeling strange and wonderful on her tongue. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me think I was alone? Elena's gray eyes, so like her mother's, filled with tears that had been held back for 3 long years. Because they have ways of reading minds, of extracting truth from the unwilling. As long as you truly believed you were nothing, as long as you truly felt abandoned, they couldn't use you to find me. But now... She gestured weakly toward Princess Seraphina's bound form. Now they know. Tomorrow, there will be more. And soon, there will be too many for even moonlight to stop. As dawn approached and Princess Seraphina's supernatural bonds began to weaken, Elena pressed something into Zara's hands, a locket that had belonged to her mother, inscribed with symbols that seemed to move and shift in the candlelight. Your 19th birthday is still 2 months away, she whispered urgently, but the prophecy speaks of early awakening in times of great danger. The Alpha King's feelings for you, the gathering of so many royal wolves, the approach of the autumn moon, all of it is accelerating your heritage beyond what we planned. She gripped Zara's hands with surprising strength, her voice fierce despite her exhaustion. Trust him, little moon. Kael Nightfall may be the only one powerful enough to protect you now. But be warned, your awakening will change everything, and not everyone will survive what's coming. The last thing Elena said before exhaustion claimed her consciousness would echo in Zara's mind for days to come. The Shadow Court has been waiting 19 years for you to reveal yourself. Now that they know you're here, they'll stop at nothing to claim what they believe is theirs. But remember, little moon, you are not their prize to be won. You are Moon Whisper born, daughter of light and shadow, and your power was never meant to serve their darkness. As she spoke, the locket in Zara's hands grew warm, and for just a moment, she could swear she heard her mother's voice whispering on the wind, "Be strong, my darling. Your real story is just beginning." Chapter 3, Dangerous Games. The second night of royal festivities brought darker undercurrents that made Zara's wolf instinct scream warnings she didn't understand. As she served wine to the assembled princesses, their conversations grew sharper, more calculating. Princess Valentina spoke in low tones about her father's armies, while Princess Celeste made veiled threats about what happened to kingdoms that refused advantageous marriages. Some rulers need encouragement to make wise choices, Seraphina murmured, her green eyes glittering with malice as she watched Kael across the room. Zara's hands trembled as she poured wine, sensing predators circling prey, though she couldn't understand why the most powerful Alpha King alive would need protection from these beautiful women. Kael's patience was fraying like rope under tension. During the formal dinner, Princess Liana placed her manicured hand on his arm and spoke of the noble burden of producing royal heirs, while Princess Valentina mentioned how unfortunate it would be if certain trade routes became unsafe for kingdoms without proper alliances. Their veiled threats disguised as flirtation made his wolf nature prowl beneath his skin, golden eyes flickering with dangerous light. When Princess Seraphina suggested a private moonlight walk to discuss their kingdom's mutual interests, his control nearly snapped. Only the sight of Zara moving silently between tables, serving others while invisible herself, kept him anchored to his human form. After the formal dinner ended, Zara escaped to the castle gardens to breathe air that didn't smell of perfume and political poison. The moonlight turned the roses silver as she sat on a stone bench, letting tears fall freely for the first time in days. She'd watched Kael smile politely at 100 marriage proposals disguised as dinner conversation, seen him grow more distant and controlled with each passing hour. Tomorrow night was the ball where he would announce his choice, and her heart would finally break completely. She pressed her hands to her chest, trying to hold the pieces together just a little longer. The sound of footsteps on gravel made her look up in panic, expecting Mrs. Blackthorn's sharp reprimand for being away from her duties. Instead, Kael emerged from the shadows like something from her dreams, his midnight black hair tousled by wind and his golden eyes blazing with emotion. "I've been looking for you," he said, his voice rough with desperation. Before she could protest or pull away, he crossed the garden in 3 long strides and cupped her face in his hands. "I can't do this, Zara. I can't smile at their threats, pretend their political games don't disgust me, or choose a wife like I'm picking livestock at market." His thumbs brushed away her tears with infinite tenderness. "I'd rather give up my crown than spend one day married to someone who isn't you." The raw honesty in his voice made her heart soar and break simultaneously. "You don't understand," Zara whispered, placing her hands over his to memorize the warmth before she had to let go. "I'm nothing, no one. I have no family, no fortune, no bloodline worth mentioning. If you choose me, your kingdom will tear itself apart. Your advisors will rebel, your allies will withdraw their support, and your enemies will see weakness they can exploit." She stood up from the bench, putting distance between them before her resolve crumbled completely. "I love you too much to be the reason your reign falls apart. Choose one of them, Kael. Choose duty over desire, alliance over affection. Be the king your people need, not the man your heart wants." But even as she spoke the words, her wolf heritage sang with recognition that this man was meant to be hers, crown or no crown. That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She paced her tiny servant's room like a caged animal, feeling something wild and powerful stirring beneath her skin. Her reflection in the cracked mirror showed eyes that seemed to glow amber in the candlelight, and her senses were so sharp she could hear conversations 3 floors above. When she pressed her palms against the cool stone walls, she felt the entire castle's heartbeat. Hundreds of people sleeping, dreaming, scheming. The sensations terrified her because they felt natural, like remembering something she'd forgotten rather than experiencing something new. Her parents had died before explaining the strange dreams, the way animals seemed drawn to her, or why she felt most alive under the full moon. But tonight felt different, charged with electricity that made her skin tingle and her bones ache with a strange, sweet pain that promised transformation. The locket Elena had given her lay warm against her chest, its ancient symbols seeming to pulse with her heartbeat. Every few minutes, she found herself touching it through the thin fabric of her nightgown, feeling power humming beneath the silver surface like caged lightning. The revelations about her aunt, about her true heritage, swirled through her mind in an endless loop that made sleep impossible. She was a moon whisper, descendant of wolves so ancient and powerful that they were hunted across centuries. The knowledge should have terrified her, but instead it felt like coming home to herself after years of feeling lost and displaced. Her reflection showed not just glowing amber eyes, but something fierce and wild stirring beneath her familiar features, something that had been waiting 19 years to finally wake up. 3 floors above, Kael wasn't sleeping either. He stood naked at his window, muscles tense as his wolf fought against human control. The moon called to him with silver voices that promised freedom from crowns, duty, and impossible choices. His golden eyes tracked movement in the garden below, where night-blooming flowers opened their petals to moonlight. Every instinct screamed that his mate was close, that the woman his soul recognized was somewhere in this castle. But tomorrow he had to choose a political bride while his true mate served wine and remained invisible. The irony was so bitter he could taste it on his tongue like blood. What his advisors didn't know, what no one in the castle suspected, was that time was running out faster than any political marriage could solve. A violent coughing fit seized him without warning, doubling him over as silver blood splattered across the marble floor. Each drop glowed briefly before fading to crimson, a reminder of the curse that flowed through his veins like liquid death. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling his heart skip erratically as the ancient magic ate away at his life force one beat at a time. 24 years, 11 months, and 3 days. That's how long Alpha Kings of his bloodline were allowed to live unless they found salvation in the form of a mate with pure royal blood. His 25th birthday was less than a month away, and every dawn brought him closer to joining the long line of kings who had died young and alone, their thrones passing to distant cousins who carried diluted versions of the same cursed legacy. At midnight, when the castle finally quieted, Zara gave up trying to sleep and made her way to the kitchen for warm milk. The stone corridors felt different in darkness, older, wilder, full of secrets that daylight couldn't reveal. She was heating milk over the dying embers when she heard footsteps that didn't quite sound human. Her head snapped up, every nerve screaming danger, as a massive shadow filled the kitchen doorway. For one heart-stopping moment, she thought she saw golden eyes reflecting firelight and something that might have been fur covering broad shoulders. Then Kael stepped fully into the light, human again but somehow more dangerous than before. Even in the dim illumination, she could see he looked different, paler, with dark circles under his eyes and a tremor in his hands that he tried to hide. "You feel it too," he said, his voice deeper than usual, carrying undertones that made her skin prickle with awareness. "The moon calling, the wildness under your skin, the way your senses are sharper tonight than they've ever been." He moved closer with predatory grace that made her heart race, but she noticed how he favored his left side slightly, as if breathing caused him pain. "You're not fully human, Zara. Neither am I. Can you smell it on me, the wolf beneath the man?" She nodded slowly, finally understanding why she'd always felt different, why animals trusted her instantly, why his scent made her feel safe and wild at the same time. But underneath his familiar pine and storm scent, she detected something else, something that smelled like sickness and silver and time running out. "My parents," she whispered, "they died before they could tell me what I was becoming." "But Kael, you smell wrong. You smell like you're hurt." The concern in her voice, the way her newly awakened senses had immediately detected what he'd hidden from everyone else, nearly broke his carefully maintained control. Kael reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers with infinite gentleness, and she gasped at the heat radiating from his skin, fever heat that spoke of a body fighting a losing battle. "You're a wolf, little moon. Your heritage has been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Tomorrow night, when the moon is full and the ball reaches its peak, your transformation will complete itself whether you're ready or not." His golden eyes glowed with protective fire, but she could see pain flickering in their depths like shadows across sunlight. "That's why I can't choose one of those princesses. You're my mate, Zara, not by politics or arrangement, but by the deepest laws of our kind. My wolf recognizes yours, even though you haven't shifted yet." As he spoke, another coughing fit seized him, this one more violent than before. Silver blood splashed across the kitchen stones as he doubled over, his carefully controlled composure cracking like ice under pressure. Zara caught him as he stumbled, her small hand surprisingly strong as she supported his weight. The blood on the ground glowed for several seconds before fading, and her enhanced senses told her this wasn't the first time tonight he'd coughed up silver. "What's happening to you?" she demanded, her voice fierce with protective instincts she didn't fully understand. "And don't you dare lie to me. I can smell the sickness in your blood, see the pain you're hiding. Tell me the truth, Kael. All of it." For a long moment, he stayed collapsed against her, drawing strength from her warmth and the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. When he finally straightened, his golden eyes were liquid with unshed tears and the weight of secrets he'd carried alone for too long. "There's a curse on my bloodline," he whispered, his voice breaking on the words. "Every Alpha King dies on his 25th birthday unless he mates with someone of pure royal blood before the moon turns dark. The curse has been eating away at me for months, silver poison in my veins, stealing my strength, my time, my future. My 25th birthday is in 27 days, Zara. Less than a month to find salvation or join the long line of dead kings who came before me. The revelation hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her legs weak. Suddenly, his urgency made terrible sense. Why he'd pursued her despite the political consequences, why his advisors were so desperate for him to choose a bride, why he looked at her sometimes like he was memorizing her face. The princesses, she gasped, understanding flooding through her like ice water. Their royal blood could save you. That's why they're all here, why everyone's so insistent you marry one of them. They're not just political alliances, they're your only chance at survival. She pulled back to look at his face, seeing confirmation in his pained expression. And you're choosing me instead. You're choosing to die rather than marry someone you don't love. Kael cupped her face in his trembling hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize were falling. I'd rather have 1 month loving you than 50 years with a crown and an empty heart, he said simply, his voice steady despite the fever burning through his veins. I know it's selfish. I know it condemns my kingdom to chaos when I die and the crown passes to my cousin Marcus, who has all the political instincts of a rabid wolf. But I can't force myself to mate with someone whose touch makes my skin crawl when the woman I love is standing right here, real and warm and perfect in every way that matters. His golden eyes searched her face desperately. I'm sorry, little moon. I'm sorry for falling in love with you when I have so little time left to give. I'm sorry for being selfish enough to claim your heart when mine is already forfeit to ancient magic and family curses. But Zara was shaking her head, her amber eyes blazing with something that looked like fury and determination combined. No, she said fiercely, her voice carrying harmonics that made the kitchen stones resonate in response. No, you don't get to apologize for loving me, and you certainly don't get to give up and die without a fight. I just found out I'm descended from the most powerful wolf bloodline in history, that my aunts sacrificed everything to keep me safe, that I have magic in my veins that people have been hunting for centuries. Do you really think I'm going to let some ancient curse steal the man I love without exploring every possible solution? She pressed her hands against his chest, feeling his heart skip and stutter beneath her palms. Tell me exactly how this curse works. Tell me the specific wording, the conditions, everything. There has to be a loophole, a way around it that doesn't involve you marrying someone else. Kael's expression shifted from resigned despair to something that might have been hope as he saw the fierce determination in her eyes. The curse was cast by a witch whose mate was killed by my ancestor 300 years ago, he explained, his voice growing stronger as he fed off her refusal to accept defeat. She bound it to the royal bloodline with words written in silver and sealed with her own life force. Let no king of Nightfall blood rule past his 25th year unless he joins his soul to one of pure royal lineage, born to power and raised in privilege. The magic recognizes bloodline purity, it can sense royal genetics going back generations, distinguish between true nobility and common blood elevated by marriage or adoption. Zara's mind raced as she processed the curse's specific language, her enhanced cognition finding patterns and possibilities that her human mind might have missed. Born to power and raised in privilege, she repeated slowly, her amber eyes growing distant as she accessed memories that felt older than her 19 years. But what defines royal lineage? Human nobility, or something deeper? The Moon Whisper line predates most human kingdoms by millennia. We were ruling wolf packs when the first human cities were just mud huts beside rivers. If the curse recognizes supernatural bloodlines. She trailed off, her eyes widening as understanding dawned. Kael, what if it's not about human royalty at all? What if the witch was referring to the old blood, the original aristocracy of our kind? Hope flickered in his golden eyes like candlelight in darkness, but he forced himself to remain cautious. Even if that's true, we don't know if your bloodline would qualify. The Moon Whispers have been hidden for generations, their power dormant, their heritage scattered. The curse might not recognize sleeping magic as active royal blood. Another coughing fit racked his frame, this one leaving him gasping and weak. Silver droplets stained his lips as he struggled to breathe, and Zara felt panic claw at her throat as she watched the curse's poison work through his system in real time. Besides, he whispered when he could speak again, your transformation hasn't completed yet. Until you fully awaken as a wolf, your heritage remains potential rather than reality. But Zara was already moving, her hands reaching for the locket Elena had given her. The moment her fingers touched the ancient silver, power blazed through the kitchen like captured lightning. The symbols on the locket's surface came alive, rotating and shifting as they responded to her touch, and suddenly the air filled with the scent of moonlight and ancient forests. Then we awaken it, she said, her voice ringing with authority that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her conscious mind. Elena said my 19th birthday was still 2 months away, but that the prophecy spoke of early awakening in times of great danger. I'd say your impending death qualifies as dangerous enough. She looked at him with eyes that now glowed like twin amber stars. Help me, Kael. Teach me how to transform, how to claim my heritage and save your life. I'm not losing you to some 300-year-old curse when we've barely had a chance to begin. The power radiating from her was intoxicating and terrifying, calling to his wolf nature with irresistible force. Kael felt his own transformation stirring in response, his human control slipping as her awakening magic sang to every supernatural instinct he possessed. Transforming before you're ready could kill you, he warned, even as his hands reached for her automatically. The first shift is traumatic under the best circumstances. Forcing it early, without proper preparation. He shook his head, silver blood still staining his lips. I won't risk your life to save mine, Zara. I won't be responsible for destroying something so precious and pure. And I won't stand by and watch you die when I have the power to prevent it, she shot back, her newfound strength blazing through every word. The locket in her hands pulsed with increasing intensity, its ancient magic responding to her desperation and determination. Around them, the kitchen began to change, shadows deepened into something alive, moonlight poured through windows that should have shown only darkness, and the very air shimmered with possibilities that existed between human and wolf, life and death, love and sacrifice. Trust me, Kael. Trust us. Trust the bond that brought us together against impossible odds. She stepped closer, bringing their joined hands to rest over his struggling heart. I can feel your wolf calling to mine, even through the curse's poison. Let them answer each other. Let them find the strength together that neither could manage alone. As if summoned by her words, transformation energy began building between them like pressure before a storm. Kael's eyes blazed gold as his wolf nature responded to her call, while silver light poured from Zara's skin like liquid starlight. The curse fought back, sending waves of poison through his bloodstream that made him cry out in pain, but her emerging power wrapped around him like armor made of moonbeams and ancient promises. Together, she whispered, her voice harmonizing with frequencies that predated human language. Whatever happens next, we face it together. And as the full moon reached its zenith above Shadowmere Castle, 2 wolves began the most dangerous transformation of their lives, not just from human to animal, but from separate souls to mated pairs whose combined power might be enough to break curses that had stood for 3 centuries. Chapter 4, The Ball of Reckoning. The Moonfall Ball transformed Shadowmere Castle into a realm of magic and menace. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across marble floors while hundreds of candles flickered like earthbound stars. The 100 princesses glittered like jeweled weapons, each dress more stunning than the last, each smile sharper than diamonds. Princess Serafina wore emerald silk that flowed like water, Princess Valentina sparkled in silver that matched her cold eyes, and Princess Liona's gold gown made her look like a vengeful goddess. They circled the ballroom like beautiful predators, waiting for Kael to appear and claim his bride. But in the servant corridors below, Zara felt her bones aching with change as the full moon's power called to the wolf awakening in her blood. What none of them knew was that the very gathering they celebrated would become the instrument of her destruction, a trap 3 centuries in the making, disguised as a royal competition. The ancient symbols carved into Shadowmere Castle's foundation had been dormant for generations, their purpose forgotten by all but the most secretive scholars of supernatural law. Tonight, those symbols began to glow with eldritch light as exactly 100 royal bloodlines gathered under one roof. The castle's builders had been members of the Shadow Court, and they had embedded binding circles into the very stones, circles that would activate only when sufficient royal supernatural energy converged in a single location. Each princess who entered the ballroom added her power to the growing magical resonance, unknowingly becoming a component in a ritual designed to strip the most dangerous bloodline in history of its inherited strength. The Shadow Court had waited 19 years for Zara Moonwhisper to reveal herself, and now they would use her own kind's nobility against her. Kael entered the ballroom wearing midnight black formal wear that made his golden eyes burn like live coals. Every princess straightened as he appeared, their practiced smiles becoming genuine as they anticipated victory. He moved through the crowd with royal grace, dancing with each woman as protocol demanded, his face a mask of polite attention. But those who knew him well, his advisors, his guards, his oldest friends, could see the tension coiled in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when yet another princess mentioned the honor of providing him with heirs. Lord Commander Thorn watched from the shadows, growing more concerned as the evening progressed without any sign of Kael choosing his queen. What troubled him most was the strange energy building in the ballroom itself, a thrumming power that made his wolf instincts scream warnings he couldn't quite understand. The curse in Kael's bloodstream responded violently to the supernatural energy gathering around him. With each princess he danced with, each royal bloodline that added its power to the mystical resonance, the silver poison in his veins burned hotter. He managed to maintain his composure through sheer force of will, but inside he was dying by degrees. The curse recognized the presence of multiple potential mates and was trying to force him toward a choice that would save his life, any choice except the servant girl whose awakening power called to his soul like a siren song. His hands shook as he led Princess Celeste through a waltz, silver sweat beading on his forehead as the magical pressure in the room continued to build toward some unknown crescendo. Below stairs, Zara tried to focus on her duties as her body betrayed her with waves of transformation pain. Her vision sharpened until she could see dust motes dancing in candlelight, her hearing picked up conversations from the ballroom 3 floors above, and her sense of smell became so acute she could identify every person in the castle by their unique scent. Elena, she still couldn't think of her as Mrs. Blackthorn. Assigned her to serve champagne to the royal guests, a punishment disguised as honor that would force her to watch Kael announce his engagement. With trembling hands, she arranged crystal glasses on silver trays, each movement sending lightning through bones that were reshaping themselves for the first time. But as she worked, she noticed something wrong with the castle itself. The stones hummed with energy that felt ancient and malevolent, and shadows moved in corners where no shadows should exist. The locket around her neck grew burning hot as she climbed the marble stairs toward the ballroom, its ancient silver reacting to whatever power was building in the castle's heart. With each step, her enhanced senses screamed warnings that her human mind struggled to interpret. The very air tasted of trap and betrayal, of spells woven in darkness and sealed with blood. When she finally reached the ballroom's service entrance, the scene before her made her newly awakened wolf nature howl with recognition of mortal danger. The gathered princesses weren't just guests at a ball, they were unwitting participants in a ritual circle, their combined royal power feeding something vast and hungry that lurked in the shadows between worlds. As midnight approached, the ballroom fell silent. Kael stood on the marble steps leading to his throne, 100 princesses arranged before him like a living rainbow of silk and ambition. His golden eyes swept the crowd, and every woman held her breath, certain she would be chosen. My lords and ladies, his voice carried to every corner of the vast room, tonight I was meant to choose a queen from among these magnificent women. A collective sigh of anticipation rippled through the crowd. But then his gaze found Zara entering through the servant's door, crystal glasses trembling on her silver tray, and his next words changed everything. However, my heart has already chosen. My maid is not among these princesses, but she is here tonight. The declaration sent shockwaves through the assembled nobility, but more importantly, it triggered the final phase of the Shadow Court's centuries-old plan. The moment Kael's words identified Zara as his chosen mate, the binding circles carved into Shadowmere's foundation blazed to life with silver fire. Ancient symbols appeared on every wall, ceiling, and floor, their eldritch glow visible through marble and stone as if the very castle had become transparent. The 100 princesses found themselves frozen in place as the ritual claimed their royal bloodlines as fuel, their eyes wide with terror as they realized they'd been played like pieces on a cosmic chessboard. The ballroom's massive crystal dome cracked with the sound of thunder as power beyond imagination began to converge on a single target, the last free moon whisper, whose awakening heritage would either be claimed by the Shadow Court or destroyed in the attempt. The ballroom erupted into chaos as 100 princesses realized they'd been publicly rejected, but their outrage was nothing compared to the supernatural maelstrom that followed. Princess Serafina's face twisted with rage, Princess Valentina's hand moved toward the silver knife at her hip, and Princess Lioness stepped forward with eyes blazing like green fire. "You would humiliate us for some servant girl?" Serafina's voice cut through the noise like a whip. "Choose now, Alpha King, accept a proper bride or face the consequences of your kingdom standing alone against those who understand the value of alliance." But even as she spoke, her body began to glow with the same silver fire that covered the walls, her royal bloodline being drained to power the Shadow Court's binding ritual. Around the ballroom, other princesses started to scream as they felt their supernatural heritage being pulled from their bodies like marrow from bones. But Kael was already moving, crossing the ballroom with inhuman speed toward the girl whose wolf nature was awakening under the full moon's power, ready to claim his mate before the world tore them apart. The curse in his bloodstream fought him every step of the way, silver poison flooding his system as he rejected the salvation that surrounded him in favor of the servant girl who represented certain death. Blood began to pour from his nose and mouth as he pushed through the crowd of terrified nobility, his wolf nature burning itself out in a desperate attempt to reach Zara before the Shadow Court's ritual could claim her. Behind him, Lord Commander Thorn shouted orders that no one could hear over the sound of reality itself being torn apart by forces older than recorded history. At the center of the supernatural storm, Zara felt the binding ritual's power reaching for her like grasping claws made of starlight and malice. The locket around her neck exploded with defensive energy, its ancient protection straining against magic that had been crafted specifically to overcome Moon Whisper defenses. Around her, the crystal glasses on her silver tray shattered into rainbow fragments that hung suspended in the air, each shard reflecting a different possible future, some showing her stripped of power and broken, others revealing paths where her heritage blazed so brightly it consumed everything in sight. She could feel the 100 princesses' royal bloodlines being channeled toward her like rivers of liquid fire, their combined power meant to overwhelm her awakening abilities and bind them forever to the Shadow Court's will. Through the chaos and magic, a figure materialized from the shadows at the edge of the ballroom, the same ancient woman who had appeared in Elena's memories, her silver hair whipping around her face like living smoke and her eyes blazing with the cold fire of distant stars. She wore robes that seemed to be cut from the fabric of night itself, and her presence made every supernatural being in the ballroom freeze with instinctive terror. Zara Moon Whisper, her voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, carrying harmonics that made the crystal chandeliers ring like funeral bells. "Your awakening has begun, but your true inheritance waits in the depths of shadow where your parents hid the most dangerous secret of all." She raised one pale hand, and the moonlight streaming through the cracked dome flickered like a dying candle. "Did you really think this was about marriage, child? 100 royal bloodlines, one sacred castle, one full moon. They've turned your mate's coronation ball into the perfect supernatural trap." The revelation hit Zara like a physical blow as understanding flooded through her enhanced consciousness. Every princess who had come to compete for Kael's hand had been promised power, position, alliance, but they were never meant to win. They were components in a ritual circle, their royal bloodlines the fuel needed to power a binding spell 3 centuries in the making. The Shadow Court had known about her heritage all along, had orchestrated this entire gathering for the sole purpose of stripping her of the power they feared above all others. Princess Serafina's investigation, the suspicious timing of the competition, the precise number of guests, none of it had been coincidence. It had all been designed to gather exactly the right amount of supernatural energy in exactly the right place to complete a working that would neutralize the Moon Whisper threat forever. Every princess who came here was promised your power if the ritual succeeded, the ancient woman continued, her words cutting through the magical chaos like silver knives. They believed they were competing for a crown, but they were actually volunteering to be sacrificed for a chance to claim what was never theirs to take. The Shadow Court has spent 19 years preparing this moment, waiting for you to reveal yourself so they could finally finish what they started when they murdered your parents. Around the ballroom, the trapped princesses screamed as the binding ritual began to tear their supernatural heritage from their bodies, their royal bloodlines flowing like molten silver toward the convergence point where Zara stood frozen in a storm of ancient magic and modern betrayal. Kael reached her just as the ritual's power peaked, his arms closing around her trembling form as silver fire erupted from every surface in the ballroom. The curse in his bloodstream was killing him by inches, but his wolf nature burned with protective fury that temporarily overwhelmed even ancient magic. "I've got you," he gasped against her ear, his voice barely audible over the sound of reality being rewritten by forces beyond mortal comprehension. "Whatever happens, I've got you." But even as he spoke, they both could feel the binding spell's inexorable pull, designed by minds that had spent centuries planning for this exact moment. The Shadow Court had accounted for every variable, every possible defense, every potential escape route. They had turned love itself into a trap, using Kael's feelings for Zara to ensure she would be exactly where they needed her when the ritual reached its climax. The ancient woman's laughter rang through the ballroom like breaking glass, sharp and cruel and final. "How touching," she sneered, her silver eyes blazing with triumph as the binding ritual neared completion. The last Alpha King of the Nightfall line dies protecting the last Moon Whisper heir as she loses everything that makes her special. "Your parents thought they could hide you from us, child. They thought love and sacrifice could overcome centuries of planning and preparation. But in the end, you came to us willingly, drawn by a heart that we knew would be your downfall." She raised both hands toward the cracked crystal dome, and the full moon's light began to dim as if eclipsed by shadows that existed outside of normal space and time. "Choose quickly, Zara Moon Whisper, surrender your power peacefully and live as a broken thing, or fight us and watch everyone you love burn in the fires of your resistance." But as the Shadow Court's representative spoke her ultimatum, something unexpected began to happen. The locket around Zara's neck, superheated by the ritual's power, finally cracked open to reveal not just her mother's protective spells, but something far more dangerous, a fragment of the original Moon Whisper covenant, sealed in silver and moonlight and bound with words that predated the Shadow Court itself. Ancient power blazed forth from the opened locket, and suddenly the binding ritual found itself fighting not just Zara's awakening heritage, but the combined might of every Moon Whisper who had ever lived or died in defense of their bloodline's freedom. For the first time in centuries, the Shadow Court's carefully laid plans began to crack under pressure they had never anticipated, the fury of ancestors who refused to let their last descendant fall to the same trap that had claimed so many others. Chapter 5: The Awakening. Zara's transformation hit her like lightning strikes, one after another, as Kael's public declaration rippled through the ballroom. The crystal glasses slipped from her hands, shattering against marble in an explosion of sound that matched the chaos erupting around them. Her bones stretched and reformed, muscles rippling under skin that felt too tight, while her human mind struggled to process the wolf awakening in her blood. She doubled over with a cry of pain and wonder as her senses exploded beyond anything she'd imagined. She could smell the fear and fury of 100 princesses, hear heartbeats racing like war drums, feel the ancient magic that flowed through Shadowmere Castle's very stones. Kael reached her side just as her eyes blazed with their first true amber fire, his strong arms catching her before she could fall. "I've got you," he whispered against her ear, his own wolf nature responding to hers with protective instincts that overrode every royal protocol. Around them, the ballroom descended into pandemonium as princesses shouted in outrage, their carefully laid political plans crumbling into dust. Princess Seraphina pushed through the crowd, her emerald gown trailing behind her like a war banner, while Princess Valentina's hand closed around the silver blade at her hip. "You cannot choose a servant over royalty." Seraphina screamed, her beautiful face twisted with narcissistic fury. We will not be humiliated by some orphan nobody. But Zara was no longer nobody. As her transformation completed itself under the full moon's power, she rose from Kael's protective embrace with grace that belonged to neither servant nor princess, but to something far older and more dangerous. Her gray servant's dress had torn during the change, but moonlight streaming through the crystal dome made her skin glow like silver starlight. When she opened her amber eyes, every person in the ballroom felt the presence of a true wolf, not just someone who could shift forms, but someone born to run with the moon. I am Zara Moon Whisper, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made crystal chandeliers ring in response, and I am not afraid of your threats. Princess Valentina struck first, her silver blade flashing toward Zara's heart with supernatural speed. But Zara moved like flowing water, her wolf reflexes carrying her out of range while her hand closed around the princess's wrist with strength that made bones creak. Silver, she observed calmly, studying the weapon that would have killed her human self. But I'm not fully human anymore, am I? Before Valentina could answer, Kael's roar shook the entire ballroom as his own transformation began. His midnight black hair grew longer, his golden eyes blazed with predatory fire, and his formal were strained against muscles that were expanding beyond human limits. The sight of their Alpha King beginning to shift sent the assembled crowd into full panic. Some princesses fainted, others screamed and fled for the exits, while the boldest drew their own concealed weapons. But Zara stepped between them and Kael, her newfound power singing in her veins as she faced down 100 enemies. He is mine, she declared, her wolf nature recognizing no authority higher than the mate bond that connected their souls. And I am his. Your politics, your alliances, your threats, none of it matters. We are wolves, and wolves mate for life. As she spoke, silver moonlight poured through the crystal dome above, blessing their union with ancient magic that no crown or kingdom could break. The battle erupted with supernatural violence as Princess Seraphina let her own wolf nature explode into the ballroom. Her emerald gown shredded as she shifted into a massive gray wolf with eyes like green fire, her royal bloodline carrying centuries of battle-hardened genetics. Princess Valentina followed suit, her silver blade forgotten as claws extended from her fingertips and her teeth elongated into fangs designed for killing. Around the ballroom, chaos reigned as some princesses revealed their true wolf forms while others fled in terror through marble corridors that echoed with howls, screams, and the sound of crystals shattering under supernatural forces. Kael's transformation was magnificent and terrifying, his human form dissolved into a midnight black wolf the size of a small horse, golden eyes blazing with alpha power that made the air itself tremble. He placed himself protectively in front of Zara, his massive frame radiating deadly intent toward anyone who threatened his mate. But Seraphina was no ordinary wolf, her pack's bloodline traced back to the ancient warrior queens, and she moved with lethal grace as she circled them. You think love conquers all, she snarled, her voice distorted by her shifted form. I'll tear her throat out and show you what real power looks like. She lunged with supernatural speed, claws aimed for Zara's exposed neck. Zara's wolf instincts exploded into full awareness as death approached on silver claws. Time seemed to slow as her own transformation completed itself, her human form flowing like quicksilver into a wolf with fur the color of moonbeams and eyes that blazed like amber stars. She met Seraphina's attack head-on, their bodies colliding with a sound like thunder as supernatural forces clashed in the center of the crystal ballroom. Around them, other battles raged as loyal guards fought to protect their king while enemy wolves sought to claim territory and vengeance. Princess Valentina stalked toward Kael's exposed flank, silver claws gleaming with deadly intent. But Zara was discovering that her orphaned bloodline carried its own ancient power. As she grappled with Seraphina, silver moonlight poured through her fur like liquid starlight, making her stronger with each passing moment. She broke free from the larger wolf's grip and stood between all threats and her mate, her voice carrying harmonics that made every wolf in the ballroom freeze with instinctive recognition. I am daughter of the moon's first children, she howled, memories flooding back as her heritage awakened fully. My parents died protecting secrets older than your kingdoms. You face not just a servant, but the last of the Moon Whisper line, and we bow to no one." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled wolves as they recognized bloodline magic that predated all their political alliances. Seraphina stumbled backward, her green eyes wide with sudden fear as she realized she'd attacked someone whose very existence was legend among their kind. Princess Valentina's claws retracted as ancient instincts warned her against continuing the fight. Around the ballroom, enemy wolves began to retreat as they felt the weight of power that could remake their world. Kael shifted back to human form and moved to Zara's side, his golden eyes blazing with pride and protective love as he faced down the remaining threats. "The choice is made," he declared, his alpha voice carrying to every corner of the castle. "Zara Moon Whisper is my queen, my mate, and your future Luna. Anyone who cannot accept this is free to leave my kingdom and never return." Dawn broke over Shadowmere Castle like a benediction as the last of the defeated princesses departed in their jeweled carriages, their political dreams shattered against the reality of true mate bonds. Zara stood beside Kael on the marble balcony where their story had begun, watching the sun paint the mountains gold while her new reality settled around her like a crown made of starlight. The servants' quarters were empty now. She would never again scrub floors or serve others while remaining invisible. Instead, she wore a simple white dress that Kael had personally chosen, her amber eyes bright with wonder as she gazed out at the kingdom that would soon be hers to protect and cherish. The coronation ceremony was unlike anything the castle had ever witnessed. Instead of traditional pomp and circumstance, Kael insisted on a moonlight ritual that honored their wolf heritage above human politics. Under the silver glow of the full moon, with the pack gathered in the ancient stone circle behind the castle, he placed a crown of twisted silver and moonstones on Zara's head while she wore a gown that seemed woven from captured starlight. "You are my Luna," he declared, his voice carrying across the mountains where their howls would echo for generations. "My queen, my mate, my heart made manifest in flesh and bone." When their lips met in their first kiss as king and queen, the entire pack howled their approval to the silver moon. But even fairy tales have shadows, and theirs was just beginning. As they held each other close under the starlit sky, a messenger arrived with news that chilled Zara's blood despite the warmth of Kael's arms around her. Lord Commander Thorn approached with a scroll bearing the black seal of the Shadow Court, an ancient tribunal of wolves who claimed authority over all supernatural politics. "Your Majesties," Thorn said, his weathered face grim with concern, "the Shadow Court has declared your mating invalid. They claim that Zara's bloodline carries a curse that will destroy any kingdom she rules. They demand she be stripped of her crown and exiled, or they will unite every enemy pack against us in a war that will drench the mountains in blood." Kael's golden eyes blazed with protective fury as he read the ancient parchment, while Zara felt ice form in her veins as she recognized symbols her parents had shown her in secret, marks that meant forbidden, dangerous, and destroyer of worlds. Her newfound happiness crumbled as memories surfaced of her mother's whispered warnings about enemies who would stop at nothing to prevent the Moon Whisper bloodline from claiming its destined power. "Their right to fear me," she whispered, her voice breaking with the weight of inherited secrets. "My family's magic isn't just powerful, it's prophesied to either save or destroy the supernatural world. And I don't know which it will be." As if summoned by her words, a figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the stone circle, an ancient woman with silver hair and eyes like frozen starlight, wearing robes that seemed to be cut from the fabric of night itself. Every wolf in the pack stepped back instinctively, recognizing power that predated their oldest legends. "Zara Moon Whisper," the woman spoke, her voice carrying echoes of prophecies written before the first human cities rose from the earth. "Your awakening has begun. But your true inheritance waits in the depths of the Shadow Realm where your parents hid the most dangerous secret of all." She raised one pale hand, and the moonlight around them flickered like a dying candle. "Choose quickly, young Luna, embrace your destiny and risk destroying everything you love, or remain ignorant and watch as the Shadow Court burns your kingdom to ash." For the first time, Lily felt safe in Kael's arms, but in the shadows of the ancient stones, another pair of silver eyes had already chosen her fate.